Our favorite UFO whistleblower, David Grusch, has finally made an appearance on the granddaddy of all podcasts, the Joe Rogan Experience. Now, many longtime fans of Joe's will know that he's an avid believer in the alien phenomenon, so this was a long-awaited appearance to finally get an unscripted look at David Grusch behind the scenes, potentially the most important whistleblower in American history. So, without further ado, here are the 5 biggest takeaways from David Grusch's appearance on Joe Rogan. And the first big takeaway is that the UFO phenomenon is not just limited to the US. Now, what Dave's about to reference here is a case that I have actually covered on this channel, which was that in the 1930s, fascist Italy apparently recovered a crashed UFO, and that near the end of World War II, US forces were able to retrieve these objects and get them out of the country.
But I did talk about publicly the 1933 retrieval, and I did that tactically, and I ran that through the security approval office because I wanted to show that this is much older and it's international. It's not like a US thing. I mean, this stuff is landing or crashing around the world, and unexpected countries have had this happen, and that's why I picked that, because I thought that was a interesting case. And then, of course, Pope Pius XII and the Vatican were involved, back-channeling it through the OSS, which became the CIA later, to FDR, and that's how the US knew something weird happened in Italy right before World War II, but...
So what happened to that vehicle?
So we knew where it was being stored at a particular location after the crash, and then the military came in and we grabbed it towards the end of the war, 1944, 1945, because, like I said, Pope Pius XII already kind of let FDR know.
So Dave is claiming that not only has the US had knowledge of the UFO phenomenon for decades before Roswell, but so have other governments. And not only that, but other governments are aware that our programs exist and have programs like this of their own.
Knowing that our adversaries were aware of this reverse engineering program, are we aware of their reverse engineering programs?
Yeah.
Which countries have
you could probably guess.
Okay. Yeah, the big ones.
And you wouldn't be it won't be too shocking.
Okay.
But I won't acknowledge what the US may know.
Right.
So.
And that leads us to our second big revelation, which is that not only do these programs exist, but that the highest elected members of our government have been denied access to them.
In spring 2021, I actually flew with a couple colleagues of mine to Las Vegas, and I met with Senator Harry Reid about 9 months before he died. And of course, he's a private citizen now, and I wanted to brief him on the topic, and I wanted to get his kind of thought leadership on it because, he was a Gang of 8 member, right? Which is the top most cleared senators and congressmen. He was the majority leader, for God's sakes, of the Senate. So I'm sitting there in Harry Reid's living room, right next to him with some other witnesses that were there with me, and he straight up says, he's like, yeah, I knew we had UFO material. I was denied access for decades. I tried to get access, and then he explained some of his efforts during OSAP, and I was like, holy shit, did the former majority leader just say, did he just confirm this to me as well? I was already talking to these amazing high-level people, but I have Harry Reid literally saying, yes, we have material, and, he knew it was non-human. So he had like a weekly call with President Joe Biden at the time, and he straight up said to me he was going to talk to President Biden about this issue.
So former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has briefed the president on at least one occasion that these programs exist, and the president may or may not even have knowledge of them. But now here's where we start to get to the really juicy part of this discussion. Dave admits that not only are there biologics that have been recovered, but that there are multiple different types of these entities.
But there are actual reports that we have biological remains.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
How many?
It's up there as well, just like with the
and
the
they vary.
Yeah.
There's different kinds. Mm-hmm. Do we have an understanding? You don't have to answer where they came from.
Nobody I talked to espoused any specific origin to me. We may know that, but I'm not aware of anything, so I don't know.
So are we talking multiple species here? Are we talking remote-controlled drones or biologic drones? Unfortunately, Dave isn't able to release any of that information in a non-classified setting yet, but we at least get some kind of confirmation that at least Dave Grusch believes there are multiple different types of whatever these entities are. And for the fourth takeaway, I actually want to come back down to earth a little bit, because it's here where Dave goes into as much detail as he can at least, about the details of the retaliation that he suffered. And this is the longest clip I'm going to play, but I want to include it because I think it's really important to highlight the immense psychological, professional, personal, emotional struggles that people have to go through when they're carrying secrets of this magnitude and they're trying not to destroy themselves in the process of disclosing them.
Can you discuss the things that have happened to you personally?
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff I have to be purposely vague because there's an open Inspector General reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I'm not here to compromise the investigation by tipping off my antibodies that may be watching right now. But, when I really started looking into this, they came after me so hard to try to revoke my clearance, ruin my career, kicked me out of my agency, and they accused me of everything you could possibly think of with no evidence. For example, at first they wanted to say, "Oh, Dave, you have mental health stuff you didn't report to us. We're concerned because we think you might have an ongoing mental health issue." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I reported that I had PTSD from Afghanistan in my military service several years ago, and I sought help for that. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm high functioning autistic, and I didn't know that until my early 30s, and how I process trauma I didn't really understand until many years later. And I sought help for that, and they were trying to say that I had some secret mental health problem that I haven't been reporting to. So I had to go through this whole process. 3 agencies at the same time investigated me for that, which I don't even know if that's legal. They tried to say that I mishandled classified, all this other stuff. It was insane. Apparently I was under criminal investigation for a couple months, and I didn't even know that, and nor did they interview me, but they made a finding with no evidence they tried to use against me that I had to spend money to basically litigate and maintain my employment and my clearance, which I did, for the record. I maintained my clearance. I resigned with full accesses. I'm just debriefed now, but I maintained my top secret eligibility, and I left with my own accord. And of course, they ruined one of my boss's careers in another agency. They walked him out of the building and revoked his clearance and terminated him as a show of force after they were going after me. And I feel sorry for that certain individual. And they came after coworkers of mine. I can't get into who, what, when, where, and why to protect their identities and their own process. But so that's what happened to me professionally. And then what happened to me personally was very disturbing. So I have to be very vague about this because ongoing investigation, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying, is they showed my wife and I they can touch me at any time, 2 times. And it was very disturbing. It was in conjunction with some other people getting a message like that are, let's say, publicly well-known. Some that aren't publicly well-known. And of course, I immediately reported that to, counterintelligence, federal law enforcement local to me, because it, wasn't criminal, but it was like a fuck you to me. And this was right before I filed my whistleblower complaint. Now, I don't know who did this, entity who did X, Y, and Z to my wife and I, identity unknown, but it fucking happens. And I, provided that documentation to a couple special agents, and I just knew that it was getting serious.
So now we have a better idea of the cost that individuals with this knowledge have to pay in order to break their silence. And that leads us right into the 5th and final takeaway, where Dave is asked what the future looks like and how we're going to ensure that nobody ever has to go through what Dave Grusch went through.
As it stands right now, what's the future for this stuff? What's the future for these disclosures, and what are the bottlenecks?
Well, certainly from the governmental process, as long as the House doesn't kill this Schumer amendment, and that's why I'm discussing it here with you, because if they don't pass it, it's going to be the greatest setback to humankind in U.S. history, literally. So the presidential panel gets impaneled about 90 days or so after the passage of the bill. So by Christmas, as long as it doesn't get killed, will be in the National Defense Authorization Act. Panel will be formed, say February, March. Then they have a 300-day process to develop a initial plan for the president. And we have a plan out to 2030 where this stuff starts getting rolled out. Knock on wood, perfect storm. Things could get delayed. We can create a tsunami event where the U.S. government, its allies, and maybe our adversaries. But really, if the U.S. government doesn't get their house in order here, I mean, you could have uncontrolled disclosure events such that either maybe the non-human intelligence is like, yeah, let's do it. Or what if one of our adversaries decides to disclose and they become the messiah figure on this, and we lose sovereignty or national supremacy in that regard from an open and honest civil society perspective. But I think the we're getting close, I think, as
We're
long as...
certainly closer than we've ever been before.
Well, that's all I have for you guys on this one. Do you think Dave Grusch is a legit whistleblower carrying secrets that have the potential to change the future of mankind? And do you think the US is likely to reveal one way or the other what they've been hiding? Let me know in the comments below, and I will catch you guys on the next one.